Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, leave it in the ring.
And welcome back to a special Leaving the Ring edition, which is the Stack Up Show, which is a show about where we get fighters from the past and stack them up to the fighters of today's generation and how well would they do against them. So our two picks for today with me, myself, Amilcar, my co-host here on Leaving the Ring and the Stack Up Show, is Joe Calzaghe and Ike Quartey. Pretty excited about the lineup here for these two guys here, Amilcar. I don't know about you, but about talking about how well would they do against guys like David Benavidez, Saul Canelo Alvarez, who's really honestly has impressed everybody since his move to 168. Even Caleb Plant, even though we get a lot, like we're getting flooded right now on our Leaving the Ring Gmail about how boring he is and how nobody really cares to ever see him. Even though he's got a fight coming up.
What about the Fagenbutts fight, Dave? The Fagenbutts fight. That was exciting as hell. You didn't like that fight? You didn't like the Fagenbutts fight?
I did. I mean, what could we say about it? Even the whole. I mean, look, even you can even bring in the prospects at 168 right now. Think about this: Joe Calzaghe, who he just threw me off with that, man.
Sorry about that.
No worries. Joe Calzaghe, who left and retired, with his career, with his solid 46-0. He only had 32 knockouts. His really defining fights was against Bernard Hopkins, which was long overdue, and Roy Jones Jr., which you can argue, both men were really on the way out. But let's not forget, Bernard Hopkins went on with his career, winning titles, and was considered very dangerous. He ended up inheriting a new nickname, the Alien. Remember that?
Yeah, well, he also fought Mikhail Kessler in Kessler's prime.
Well, that's what Jeff Lacy.
He took Mikhail Kessler's O, and he totally sunned Jeff Lacy.
He did, dude. He did.
I mean, he had him on his knee, and he was giving him that spanking.
Oh yeah, I mean, he ended Jeff Lacy's career. There was no longer Jeff Lacy. I don't know what happened to him. He definitely just ethered him, as what Joe Habib would say. And stuff. Chicano Prophet, ¿qué pasó? A-Rod, what's going on, brother? So we're going to go down on our breakdown. First, we're going to go up with Joe Calzaghe. I was a massive Joe Calzaghe fan. Chicano Prophet calling him Cal Sloppy.
Jeff Lacy said. Jeff Lacy said that.
He did. The pity pat was not going to work against me, is what Jeff Lacy had said before entering in the ring. Joe, Shoe Shine Boxy, what's up, brother? How you doing, man? I was a fan. I knew. I remember back when he was 168 because he retired out at 175. But at 168, the pool was really shallow. There wasn't a whole lot. His best wins were like over, like Roy Jones, Bernard Hopkins. Guy we just mentioned right now. I just went blank for a moment here. But I mean, if you really think about it, right now in 2020, you got to say the crops are a lot more dangerous. Would you say there, Amilcar? Would you think that this crop of fighters right now at 168 that are looming around in that pool are far more dangerous than the guys that Calzaghe was looking at when he was reigning as the unified champion at 168?
Yeah, I would say so. Definitely Canelo is. I mean, you look at the guys that he was kind of fighting, whether it was, I remember Omar Sheikha from ESPN Friday Night Fights fame, and, guys like somebody else that he fought there. Oh, Sakio Bika would have been another one.
Right.
And he fought Peter Manfredo Jr.
Which would make no sense when he did fight him. If the internet was, I think Twitter wasn't around yet when that happened. Just YouTube. YouTube was kind of the explosion. And I remember doing a video about that, and I wasn't too excited about Peter Manfredo, who came from the Contender Series, getting a title shot against Joe Calzaghe. But really, honestly, that was really kind of what was out there for him to pick at, just because of the fact that he had to move up. He would have to move up to face Bernard Hopkins or even Roy Jones Jr., which should have happened sooner than later. But it was really up to the Americans. They didn't want to go overseas. And at that time, let's admit here, going overseas really didn't do much for an American fighter. The money was at Vegas, and that's where a lot of UK guys wanted to go. Ricky Hatton came down to fight Floyd Mayweather, and Joe Calzaghe would have done that. It was really brave of Jeff Lacey, and it cost him not just a loss, but it cost him his whole career. The guy was never the same again.
No, that fight could have taken place in Florida. It would have been the same deal. I'm obviously a huge fan of the Italian Dragon, and I'm also a huge fan of his father, Enzo.
Who's the original?
He had no experience in boxing, but became such a good trainer.
I know.
Reading books, visiting gyms, learning from experienced guys, and then tying his background as a jazz musician into kind of the rhythm of fighting, which I thought was a very interesting and new way of looking at boxing training.
Absolutely. Yeah, when you think about like Lomachenko's dad, you got to think about Enzo Calzaghe first, because that guy was, man, you talk about jazz. His son had jazz feet, but he had like techno hands, bro. Straight up.
Oh, yeah. Yes, he did.
Yeah. So let's get down in here on the stack up. How do they stack up? Joe Calzaghe right now here on Leaving the Ring. How does he stack up against the young guns here today, 2020? Let's bring it up right now here on the Stack Up Show. Oh, nope, that's Ike. Wrong guy.
Ooh, yes.
There we go.
Ike, yeah.
Okay, we'll go a little later about Ike Quartey at welterweight. We're going to see how he stacks up with the crop of fighters here in 2020. But let's go Joe Calzaghe, super middleweight, who owned all the titles, who was a unified title list there at the time when he reigned, at 168. You got Caleb Plant, you got David Benavidez, you got Billy Joe Saunders, which you hate when I say BJ Saunders because he blows. And then you got Saul Canelo Alvarez. Wild card mentions though. You got Edgar Berlanga's out there. David Morel, who just fought this. I
was big time impressed by him on Saturday.
On Saturday on PBC.
Who's noticed and put on a clinic.
He did, dude. Which he's on Raw Boxing. He's going to be on Raw Boxing. Ranger's going to be interviewing him. So that should be coming on the Leaving the Ring rotation. But, so there's a lot going on at 168, man. When you think about what's happening in the lightweight division, in the flyweight division, super flyweight division, even the heavyweight division, the welterweight division, middleweight division, you got to look at the super middleweight guys. There's a lot of stuff going on there. There's a lot of potential big fights. If they all could just agree on meeting each other, we could have a lot of explosions for 2021. But let's go first off here. Amilcar, what do you think? Joe Calzaghe versus Caleb Plant. There's a lot of similarities, man. Which ones do you want to point out? What do you think is similar between those two? And what do you think isn't similar between Joe Calzaghe and Caleb Plant?
All right. Can you see me, Dave?
I can see you.
All right. Well, you remember this, right? Hands behind his back and going like that.
Oh, bit. Yeah. Definitely.
I see a lot of that versus Caleb Plant. I see Caleb Plant getting royally embarrassed, my man just said in the chat about Peter Manfredo Jr. Sorry, Caleb, but I really respect Joe's skills here. And I see him punishing him when he needs to and boxing to either a 12-round decision or a late TKO.
Wow. Really? Late TKO.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know about the TKO. I'll tell you this. I think what Joe...
I think put it on you when he had to.
I agree with you. I think that the hand speed is far more superior because the one thing with Caleb is that we haven't seen him be able to really kind of overwhelm anybody with his hand speed of worth, right? Anybody know that we could say like, oh, shit, he could actually probably match up Joe Calzaghe in hand speed. Joe's kind of showed that he could do everything with a subpar opponent to an elite opponent. There's no in between. He is who he is. Like what he says he's gonna do, he actually really follows through. Caleb Plant, we haven't seen that yet. Yes, he's tweeted out that he's the best 168, but I'm not sure if you are yet because you won't fight anybody of the
Maybe.
likes out there that are on the category we have right here on the screen of the Stack Up Show. So we don't know. So I'm going to have to assume, just like what you did right now, Amilcar, is that Joe Calzaghe goes out there, and I think he possibly just gives him a spanking so embarrassing that it's going to let the American know that he's not up and ready to step in. He shouldn't have done that going in against the Brit.
I may be wrong, but you got to fight people better than Mike Lee and Vincent Fagenbuts to convince me that you can beat a guy like Joe Calzaghe.
That's for sure, man. Up next is David Benavidez with Joe Calzaghe. Big Joe Calzaghe, fast hands, fast feet, great head movement. Went to the body, beautiful, and came back up. We used to call it painting. Painting the brush, the way he would go to the body, come right back to that head. Against David Benavidez, who also got good hand speed, puts combinations together. But could you realistically see David Benavidez, if he makes weight and he stays away from that cocaine, does he have a legitimate chance of beating Joe Calzaghe at 168 there, Milcar? What do you think, man?
Right now, I'd have to say no. A few years from now, it's a maybe. I mean, he's only 24 right now, and we're talking about the prime version of Calzaghe. Although even the past prime version of Calzaghe that we saw really literally embarrassed Roy Jones Jr. the way Roy Jones Jr. embarrassed other people. I see giving a lot of guys problems, but definitely a prime Joe Calzaghe. David Benavidez has the intangibles to do very well at being almost 6'2", I think. But he just hasn't faced the competition of any guy even close to Calzaghe. No disrespect to Andre Durrell, but yeah, I mean, a guy that went the distance with Ronald Gavril when he was champion, and it being while it was a unanimous decision, it still went the distance. I don't really know if that's a guy who's going to be competitive or has what it takes to beat Joe Calzaghe, at least now.
I like what you Shoeshine Boxing put here. Benavidez and Calzaghe is a Shoeshine classic. You got to agree with that.
Oh, yeah.
Because, David Benavidez does Shoeshine a lot. And between those Shoeshines, though, he would put in those hard punches that would actually hurt his opponent. Joe Calzaghe wasn't known like that. He was just razor sharp. His hands were quick. He really, honestly, would kind of Shoeshine the soul out of his opponents. And they kind of just, it was weird because it didn't look like he was sitting on his punches. But when he faced, Jeff Lacey, you got to admit, Jeff Lacey's face was just, slowly being deteriorated. You know what I mean? There was, new bruises and stuff just showing up after a round. And you're like, holy smoke, Joe's got some punches there. He can put some punches on there when he wants to. I just see this such a different fight because David Benavidez is a guy that likes to sucker you in. You know what I mean? He doesn't have an issue of putting his back against the ropes. He likes to do that a lot, which his dad is kind of stressed. He doesn't like him to do. But here's the thing, though. Joe Calzaghe is a guy that makes you look for him. So, would David Benavidez be able to catch up to Joe Calzaghe? Because it would have to be reversed. I don't see Joe chasing down David Benavidez the way Benavidez has done to his recent opponents, is make them come forward. I kind of see Joe Calzaghe forcing Dave to enforce the action and then him getting countered the whole night in all the rounds. But I got to agree with Jesus. I think there's a strong possibility that Benavidez could drop. I don't know if he can knock out Joe Calzaghe because he's shown he's got a really tough beard. I think he could be. I think he could be dropped.
And recovery skills.
Really high.
He gets up after he gets knocked down and keeps fighting. And to your point, David, Calzaghe actually does pretty well when guys are against the ropes. You only need to look at guys like Lacey and Jones that kind of tried to rope-a-dope a little bit, and Joe Calzaghe was having none of it.
Oh, he did the peekaboo to them,
Oh, yeah.
Right when they're up in those ropes and they got that high guard, he would peek his head right through the, between the sheets is what I would call it. Put your head between the sheets and say hi to your opponent. And he did that really well. Philly Irish Devo says Hopkins beat Calzaghe. Where was I at when that happened? I don't know.
Probably drinking some chelas.
I'm gonna have to rewatch that there, Philly. Oh man,
It was
without
it was a close fight for sure. But
it was a
let me
good
ask
fight.
everybody in the chat this: how many times do guys from Europe come over to the United States and get gift decisions? It doesn't really happen that
That's
often.
yeah. Really think about it. I mean, it was it that or was it that a lot of people in the boxing industry just wanted to see Bernard Hopkins lose, especially with his comment with no white boy would beat me. You
Well, he
know,
got beaten that night.
he got beat that night. You know, he definitely did. Philly says one of boxing's biggest robberies.
I don't
Oh
know about
man,
that. I'd
I'm
have to say honestly, I don't even think Bernard Hopkins would agree with that. I think
wow.
Bernard Hopkins would say that the Jermaine Taylor loss was
Mhm.
the biggest robbery. That's when he lost all his titles at middleweight as undisputed champ in a fight that
That's
I
true.
thought he definitely won.
Well, I could tell you this, Philly, that there is another addition that we're going to be adding to Lead the Ring, which is the run back, where we put up fights that have been left with this controversial stigma, and where we can go back and look at each round. I'm gonna have to invite you for that one, bro. Let's watch it. Let's sit down and watch it and break down each round and see if you're right. I would have because I haven't seen. You know what? I haven't seen that fight in quite some time, but I do remember it was a good back and forth fight. Like I said, Bernard Hopkins. I remember a lot of fans were like, "Well, Bernard's over the hill. He's not the same guy." But then you saw what he did later on. Like he continued on with his career until he met, the blue collar worker Joe Smith Jr. And we all know how that kind of how
That was a
that
big
ended up for
mistake.
Bernard Hopkins and stuff. But yeah, I definitely like to see rewatch that and see if there was a little bit, if the rounds should have been a little closer for B Hop there. But I think we're in agreement here about David Benavidez, man. I want to move on to BJ. BJ Saunders. Does he blow? Does he blow out Joe Calzaghe here, Milcar?
Oh man, that's so
Come
disrespectful.
on. Does
Oh
he?
man,
Does
come
he
on,
give him?
leave
Hey,
Billy
does he
Joe
blow the
alone.
horn of
Leave Billy
Joe
Joe
Calzaghe?
alone.
I
Uh,
gotta feel.
not going to shock anybody here, but before I give my thoughts on this one, those of you who are familiar with boxing out there in the UK will know that uh, well, this guy doesn't really like many people at all, but Carl Frosch really doesn't like Joe
Oh,
Calzaghe.
dude, he wanted him bad,
Yeah,
bad.
and Joe Calzaghe obviously I don't think ever shied away from an opponent. But it was business at the
The
same
Cobra.
time. And why would you fight a guy like that when you can go to the United States and garner a bigger audience and take on U.S. fighters that people consider to be kind of legends and great, which is what he did instead of fighting Calzaghe. Plus, the Cobra Frosh, and ended up moving in weight, obviously, because the Cobra was at 168 and really never moved up from 168. So, having said that, I only brought that up because this is a proposal of two guys from the UK and
Mm-hmm.
two southpaws. But I, I mean, look again. I'm sorry, but David Lemieux. I guess you could say that at 160, his biggest win was against. Fuck. Sometimes my mind just goes blank.
With
Andy
who?
Lee. Sorry, Andy Lee, who he knocked out at
Mm-hmm.
160. But at 168, he hasn't really done anything. Joe Calzaghe was the boss of 168. Billy Joe Saunders, kind of a fringe contender the fringe champion,
Right.
sorry, who I actually think is more of a middleweight than he is a 168 pounder.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree with you on that. I do agree with
you
you on that,
know,
big time.
so two southpaws, one a natural 168 pounder, one a natural 168 pounder. I think Calzaghe definitely has better hand speed and power than Billy Joe. I think they both have very good boxing skills, but also Calzaghe was very disciplined throughout his career in terms of his training and stuff. So I definitely have to give the win to Calzaghe on this one. And earlier on in the chat, we had who was it again? Let me get back to the chat. Someone said that Joe Calzaghe's fight against Caleb Plant would be boring, given that these two guys are southpaws, and given Billy Joe Saunders' style. I would agree that this fight, it's Jesus actually, that this fight would probably be more
boring.
than all of the other fights that we've seen so far.
Saunders would definitely blow the place with his boringness style. I'm just saying. I agree with you. Yeah. I think that because I think this is the thing is that Saunders would try not to engage, and he would try to make mockery of Joe Calzaghe. But Joe Calzaghe output of punches would probably be the highlight for the judges. You know what I mean? He would be the actual seek and destroyer in that match. And I definitely think that Joe Calzaghe, it would be a really boring fight, but it wouldn't be on Joe Calzaghe's part. I think, BJ Saunders just doesn't show any interest of trying to get marked up and just tries to survive so that he could say he fought the great Joe Calzaghe, because that's just the kind of prick that he is, right? Let's be honest. So I think that, Shoeshine Boxing put, why didn't Sergio Martinez meet Joe Calzaghe? A missed opportunity for a great catchweight fight. Well, I'll tell you why. Joe wasn't looking to fight anybody. Wasn't even looking at the middleweight division. He was looking for the big payday fights here in America. And Sergio Martinez didn't bring that. I mean, remember when Sergio kind of broke into that middleweight scene was because Cali Pavlik needed a fight because Paul Williams, that all fell apart. Sergio Martinez wasn't supposed to win against Cali Pavlik. Okay, so they were still trying to build up Sergio Martinez, and then what it was HBO was trying to knock him out of the middleweight contingency by setting them up by giving them to Paul Williams, doing that catch-up weight thing. So in all honesty, Sergio Martinez, I've said this numerous times, this guy never had any control of his middleweight career. And Lou DiBella could to attest to that. He would come on and we talk about that. Same thing, we had Sergio Martinez on the show. And I remember one time Sergio Martinez says, like even though I have the title, I don't have the say of who I'm going to fight or if I enter into the ring first, or what weight's going to be. Is it going to be a catch weight? Is it going to be a solid 160? The guy was really, honestly, always pet up to lose against anybody that was put into him. So hopefully that answers your question of why Joe Calzaghe and him were never talked about.
Yeah, Sergio Martinez was obviously, I would say, mistreated by HBO as well.
Absolutely.
They did him no favors. And the other reason, too, I think is a simple one, which is that Calzaghe was going up to 175 and was no longer going to be a 168-pounder. And Martinez was, I would say almost an undersized middleweight at 160. So I don't really see a catch weight that would have led to an even fight there between a guy who was going to be, if not already campaigning at 175 versus kind of a guy who was already kind of small for a middleweight.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't even a true middleweight, even though right now, he is campaigning at 168. We'll definitely, after the stack-up show, we're going to roll into our regular hour of Leaving the Ring, because we do have some fights to talk about and some news to talk about here, So as soon as we get done with the whole stack-up deal, and we'll get into that about Sergio Martinez's comeback and who he's targeting to get back in to get a title against. And I think it's pretty interesting, the matchup that he's asking for late in the year of 2021. But let's get down to Saul Canelo Alvarez against the great Joe Calzaghe, or Sloppy Zaggy, as who said that? Let's see. It was my man Prophet. He had said Sloppy Zaggy. So let me ask you, what do you think, man? Joe Calzaghe, is this a tough assignment against right now one of the most one that is considered one of the best fighters of our generation at this moment, and definitely as everybody, by taking on one of the most dangerous 168 pounders out there, and Canelo Alvarez? What do you think, man? Does he give Joe a real test, or is this more of a blowout?
I think that this is the closest fight on the list here. However, Callum Smith. Obviously, Canelo's best win at 168. Does not have the hand speed, the experience, or the troubling southpaw stance, nor does he have the combination punching of a Joe Calzaghe.
Hmm.
I see this fight ending in a controversial split decision, one way or the other.
You know what I see here with Joe Calzaghe when I think about this fight? And I was really thinking about this
Yeah,
fight last night because we were discussing,
yeah.
what we wanted to do with the stack up. And I was like, if you really look at it, Joe Calzaghe's reign at 168 was really, really weak. And his noticeable wins, as I have on the tickers, like Chris Eubank, who's on the way out, Jeff Lacey, who's really untested, Mikkel Kessler, who honestly was a one-trick pony, Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. were guys that are really kind of already established, but they weren't really in their prime, even though Philly says that he thinks that Bernard Hopkins won that fight in a very close matchup. I kind of see that Canelo would be a new look to Joe Calzaghe. My question would be is whose reflexes would be better in that fight? Because if there's one thing about Joe Calzaghe's reflexes and his timing, it was uncanny. Like he was able to see shots, and then he was able to counter those shots. Where we now see Canelo has finally got into is like the best we've ever seen this kid, okay? And in the development that we witnessed kid from 140. Think about this. Saul Canelo has started at 140 and he's at 168. And at 168, this is the best version of Saul Canelo we've ever seen. Would this be this version of Canelo, would it be the best that Joe has ever seen? I would have to say yes. I think that is the best guy at 168 that Joe would have to face. But I also would say that this would be the best 168 pounder that Canelo has ever seen as well. This is a tough match, man, in my opinion. I think Joe could really frustrate Saul Canelo Alvarez the way Floyd Mayweather frustrated him at 154, which you could contribute his age and that he was kind of drained for that fight. But I don't think there'd be any excuses here of seeing the Mexican warrior right now struggling to land some clean shots on Joe Calzaghe. Am I missing something?
No, I think they're both capable of landing shots on one another. And, I also really just question the people who keep labeling Joe Calzaghe as, a slapping puncher. What he actually did was that he'd shoe shine, as somebody mentioned a lot, and he'd mix the power of his shots with which a lot of very experienced fighters do. Ray Leonard used to do that a lot. He mixes his flurrying with his power shots. And what Joe Calzaghe kind of, I would say, was a disadvantage for him is when he reigned, the super middleweight division was a very European heavy division. There weren't really a lot of guys from the U.S. that were campaigning in it. And we live in a very U.S. centric media universe, especially here in the United States.
Right.
We're almost just like, if it doesn't happen in the U.S. or doesn't it involve people from the U.S., then it doesn't really matter. And, it took some time for the super middleweight division to become what it is right now, which is a kind of a more global division, at least with guys like obviously Canelo there and more fighters from the United States. But it still, let's be honest, doesn't have the status of this middleweight division. And anyone who thinks Calzaghe is boring, I mean, if you didn't find the Jones fight exciting, I mean, I did. Just Google Joe Calzaghe or the Calzaghe Mitchell fight. All right, it was knockdowns back and forth, and it ended with a brutal Joe Calzaghe knockout of Mitchell. It was devastating. Just go look at that fight if you think this man's boring or doesn't have any punching power.
Philly said to try to call in. Philly, give it another shot if you can call in again, and we'll patch you right in, man. Hear your thoughts about Joe Calzaghe and about the four mentionable fighters that we said of today. Would he have problems with him? Canelo Alvarez, I think he does. I think he has a lot of problems with him, but at the end of the day, I'm going to have to ride with Joe Calzaghe, man. I think just the experience of what Joe was able to do, and like I said, he knew how to turn it on when he was in the pocket. He knew when to move. His head movement was phenomenal. I just think that he would get marked up a lot with Canelo Alvarez because, as you see, what we've seen with Saul is that if you submit to him, he's able to really do what he wants. He doesn't have to evolve or do anything else to create something. Where Joe was always kind of, when I witnessed him, it was always like he was reinventing himself in there. He's always doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. People had questioned his chin, his heart, all the stuff that was actually always questioned about him. His punching power, he always answered it. That's what I liked about Joe. The one thing that I liked about Joe was that he actually invited the negativity because he wanted to prove everybody, and even his father Enzo, they wanted to prove that they were more than what you thought they were. And I think that's what made Joe Calzaghe so extraordinary, man. Such a phenomenal fighter. But I do think that, on the scorecards in Vegas, it would have to lean with Canelo Alvarez.
That's why I was saying, that's why I was saying controversial split decision.
Controversial split decision because I do think that Canelo punches would be a lot louder, if that makes any sense, which really honestly sways the audience and the judges. So this is something that Joe would have to go out there and just be so perfect, so on point on that night that there is no way of denying him that decision. But
this is the Mitchell fight here right now. You're going to see it on the screen.
Right.
So he gets knocked down there, takes a shot, but he comes back up and just watch the oof. Look at that. And clocks him. Yep. And this video doesn't even show the back and forth inside fighting that these guys were doing. So the other thing I wanted to say is that Chris Eubank Sr., not Junior, Senior, who was in a lot of wars with a lot of heavy-handed guys, heavy-handed fighters, was also saying that, going into the fight, he thought Calzaghe was a slapper. And that by the end of the first round, he told his corner, this guy can hit. So, I mean, he's given an interview about that. We're showing clips of the Kessler fight. This was not a boring fight.
No, that was not a boring fight. And honestly, I think a lot of people thought that Kessler being, at the time coming in with his record, that he was going to be able to take on Joe Calzaghe's strengths. Because like I said, he was kind of more viewed as a pity patter kind of guy. Yep. And you know what?
A soft European, which is the stereotype.
And he went out there and he imposed himself, and not just in his hand speed, but he imposed his strength, which was his upper body, him coming forward, him taking control in ring generalship. Same thing with Bernard. Bernard Hopkins was known to kind of outmuscle you, rough you up. And he wasn't able to really do that convincingly in that fight against Joe Calzaghe.
No, and he also didn't throw enough punches, to be honest, and oftentimes smothered his work. What I would say about Calzaghe lastly, this is the last thing I'll say on him, is that he always was fighting for recognition, not just in the United States, but also in the United Kingdom, because he's not English. He's not Scottish.
No, he's Wales.
He's an Italian. He's an Italian dude that grew up in Wales.
Yep.
Which is like the smallest of the countries in the United Kingdom, obviously behind England and Scotland. So he never really had the UK behind him the way English fighters have that fan base behind them, whether it's Prince Naseem Hamed, Ricky Haddon, Anthony Joshua, Carl Froch, you name it. He never had that. He was a star in Wales and was never, in his eyes, given the
recognition
that he felt he deserved. And I actually went to a talk when I was out in the UK that was Joe Calzaghe was having and spoke to him one-on-one about all of this stuff. It's he was an Italian dude from Wales with a father trainer who spoke with a funny accent. He wasn't the guy that was going to get the recognition there or here in the United States.
No, he definitely wasn't. And he was actually like fine wine the longer he stayed around, the more you kind of appreciate his style and who he was. I mean, I definitely didn't start appreciating him until after the Jeff Lacy fight. I actually even didn't even really pay attention to Joe Calzaghe because, like you said, we were American fan bases were really honestly kind of caught up with, what was being shown to us at the time. And Joe was like he was on Showtime, and Showtime was like the B side of networking of the networks, right? So yeah, definitely underrated, man. Retired, and what are you gonna say, Milcar?
I was just gonna say maybe we could go over the phone number again because I didn't receive any calls here, and Philly's saying he tried to call in. It's area code 347-460-1773. All right, 347-460-1773. That's the hotline. So just call that.
It's right on the top there.
We'll put you right in.
It's right there. Can't miss it.
Yeah.
Call in right there, Philly. We'd love to have you on, man. Chop it up here.
Or send me a text, and I'll call you right back. Either way, I can answer text messages as well on that number.
So going back, I think we're all in agreement here. I think Joe probably would lose out to Canelo Alvarez on a split, controversial decision. Raider, LA Boxing, what's up, brother? Let's see what he's got to say. He said Joe Calzaghe was nice, but Canelo is another level and is on his way to be on an all-time great. Canelo's defense, slipping punches, rolling punches, counter punching, and timing and accuracy is crazy. But
I could say the same thing about Calzaghe.
I was going to say, say the same thing about Joe because in reality, Canelo hasn't fought anybody of at 168. I don't think there's anybody. I mean, close to that. I mean, I can't even say B.J. Saunders or Caleb Plant come close to what Joe Calzaghe was. There's like a little bit of similarities, but not a whole lot. Not what Joe brought.
Billy Joe's smaller, doesn't have the hand speed, and doesn't have the punching power of Joe Calzaghe.
Yeah. You could call Joe's punching power slappy, but there was some pop in that. Now, if ever you want to have right, but if ever you want to claim Glovegate, where this guy's punching with open palm, Joe did that a lot. It was a lot of open palm punching and stuff that he got called on. So then you got a good claim on that if you want to do Glovegate. I know how much a lot of the YouTubers here on this platform love to have their Glovegate conspiracies, man.
I'm excited about the next one, Dave.
Yeah, let's get down to the next one. Again, you guys want to call in, certainly can. Let's talk some boxing here on the Stack Up Show, which is a special edition of Leaving the Ring. Hotline is 347-460-1773. Let's talk boxing here. Let's go with Ike Quartey. Ike Quartey, 37 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw, and 32 KOs under his belt. But let's look at the crop of fighters in the welterweight division. Ike Quartey held the, the IBF? Was it the IBF that he was holding on to at the time?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, was it? Yeah, it was either IBF or WBA. I don't remember, but he held it from like 94 to 98. I know it's on the next segment here on the ticker, so don't.
It was the WBA. WBA.
There you go. Yeah. The WBA. I knew it was one of those. Okay, but right now,
I thought he beat Oscar personally.
A lot of people thought that. Actually, that's another one running back I'd love to do about that. Yeah. Rewatch that fight and see if he did win that fight against Oscar De La Hoya, which was a phenomenal fight between those two. Man, what a great fight, man. Right now, who you got in the welterweight division for Ike Quartey? If he was around here on 2020, he would have to face Manny Pacquiao, Sean Porter, Terrence Crawford, and Errol Spence Jr. Let's go with Manny Pacquiao here first. And Milcar, what do you think?
You hit me with the toughest one, bro.
Got to start off with him because everybody's writing out. Listen, he's the first on the top of the list because everybody's writing him out. Everybody's like, oh, he's on his way out. He's done. He's over.
Are we talking about the current Manny or are we talking about the prime Manny?
No, we're talking about. We have to talk about the current Manny, not the Manny that just moved into the welterweight division. The Manny that everybody thinks he's prime and right to take.
This Manny's taking on the Ike Quartey that fought Jose Luis Lopez and Oscar De La Hoya,
yes,
and Omar and Vince Phillips and those guys?
Yes, sir. You got it right there.
Oh man, I'm a huge Manny fan. This is tough. This is tough.
Jesus
The
says,
only
Ike
thing-
action-packed. You know it.
Oh my man, he was one of my favorite fighters. I'm born in the '80s, was watching boxing in the '90s. I was the first time I saw Ike Bazooka Quartey, I was hooked. Period.
Here, Philly said he tried to call in again. He's not able to get through.
I'm not receiving any calls, man. I got the thing right in front of me.
Hmm.
Philly, could you send me a text and I'll call you back off the text? How about that?
Well, I'll tell
Send
you
me a
what
text
I
with
liked
your number
about.
and we'll call you right back.
Yeah, do that, Billy. I tell you what, one thing that captured me why I became a huge fan of Ike Quartey is that high guard, dude. Like he literally, his whole arm, bro. Like I've never seen anybody do that after. Have you ever seen anybody basically use that high guard like a shield?
High guard combined with abs of steel.
Abs of steel and dude, a bazooka jab. That's what he was known for.
Oh my God, the jab was unreal.
Unreal.
I got to go
bro.
back and watch more Ike Quartey right now.
Well, we'll put up some highlights of Ike Quartey in a short minute. Let's get down here. So we got 4 guys here. Manny Pacquiao is the first one.
Claudia tried to do an impression of Ike Quartey when he fought.
It was a good impression.
At the Cowboys Stadium. Unfortunately for Claudia, he didn't have the defensive skills or the jab or the punching power of Ike.
Or the
so
fire.
What ended up happening,
or the fire of Ike.
Exactly. Okay. So it ended up just being a situation where he was kind of just almost a human punching bag for a lot of the fight. I don't see Ike Quartey getting knocked out, but I could potentially see Ike Quartey knocking out Manny.
Ooh, really? Knocking out Manny?
Look, I mean, Manny we can't forget he got put to sleep, bro. By Wamba. He got put to sleep, and Ike Quartey can crack. If he lets his guard down, Ike's got the power to do it.
You know what though? Let me put this as an account because like Raider put out there, not fair. Prime Quartey versus post Manny. Prime Quartey beats. Probably beats the brakes out of Manny. I gotta defend Manny here. I'm gonna tell you what. The Ike Quartey though. The type of, I mean, look, he was hurt by Jose Luis Lopez by a nasty right hand that dropped him late in the round, and he went on survivor mode. Okay, the thing that when Kaladi decided, Joshua Kaladi decided to try to adopt the bazooka style. The one thing that he lacked was the fire of Ike, and honestly, the jab wasn't as strong. And he waited for Manny to tee off of him first, which was the wrong thing to do because Manny, if you just sit there like a punching bag, that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to use you like a punching bag. Okay, Ike.
He also. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, if you go back and you see what De La Hoya was able to do with Ike, is that Ike gave you those opportunities which Oscar got by landing the left hook and dropping Ike because Ike would suck you in make you think he's just going to stay with his high guard and peekaboo and then that he's going to wait for you to finish what he was doing. He wouldn't do that. He would actually let you start touching him and boom, boom, he would let his hands go. I think that even the post-Pacquiao would be able to sneak in some really nasty shots, being a southpaw, and still, I think his speed is still there. It's not like he's not that fast anymore, Manny Pacquiao. So I think Manny actually gives Ike a real big run for his money. I don't think Ike knocks him out, but I think Ike beats him convincingly just with that jab alone. Because Manny will have a lot of issues. With such a on-point time jab that Ike threw, I think it just keeps Manny off balance.
Yeah, I mean, he had that kind of a power jab, which was straight. And he also had that kind of a half uppercut, half jab, which was really unreal. And then also one of his great punches was the left uppercut. And what he'd often do, like you just said, David, is he'd cover up, right? He gives the guy a false sense of security. He could take a half step back and then come back with a wicked jab, followed by a right hand, followed by
I
a
think
hook,
you see why
or
those guys
or
don't
or,
talk
or
about
right
fighting.
hand. Let's see what you're showing right now.
And there he is right there against Ralph Jones. And these are the best highlights of Ike Quartey at his best. I mean, and once he had you hurt or he smelled blood, I mean, this guy jumped all over you,
Oh yeah,
you know?
definitely.
Yeah, I was such a massive fan, but he was a fighter that just couldn't seem to get that marquee win that he really, really needed. And you know what? Do you talk about walking away from the sport with a bad taste in your mouth? Ike Quartey definitely did, man. He walked away brokenhearted. I remember, like in his interviews, man, and how bitter he was. Like even when he lost, because so many fights were taken, like especially the Oscar De La Hoya fight was you know
Yeah.
a lot of folks thought he was robbed from that. He walked away like always feeling that way. Fernando Vargas beat him. He was like, no, they stole it from me. And I actually thought that Vargas did beat him convincingly.
Yeah. Well, the thing with the Vargas fight is it was Ike Quartey's first fight at 154, if I remember correctly. And I just felt that at that time, and I still feel today, like Vargas was too young, too strong, too determined
Too cocky.
for Ike Quartey at that time.
Yeah, most definitely.
I mean, he paid for it against Tito, but against Quartey wasn't able to really make him pay for that. Again, it was his first fight at the weight, and
right.
I just feel like he was a little bit overwhelmed by Vargas, and that was really the last.
Well, that was out of his weight division too. You know what I mean? He was actually going up. He was looking for the big fights, and he was chasing the bigger fights. So that's why he took on, Fernando Vargas. Okay, going off and then Sean Porter, a short, stocky, bull type of fighter, a linebacker against Ike Quartey. What do you think, man? Ike Quartey all day, or does Sean Porter is he able to break the will of the bazooka? And Gilbert put out there. Gilbert put out there. Bazooka beats them all. I'm not impressed with the crop, crop of fighters that are out there right now.
I can see why he'd feel that way, but the hardest one here for me was Manny. I don't see Sean Porter beating Ike Quartey.
I don't see it either. You know what? If Kell Brook can humble you with a jab, and if you had a rate whose jab was far superior, Bazooka all day. Bazooka would really humble Sean Porter, keep him at the end of his jab, occasionally throw that right, which really, honestly, nobody really worried about the right hand of Bazooka because he was kind of thrown. We're just talking about Joe Calzaghe. It was kind of slappy, man, the way he would throw that right hand. You know what I mean? And then he did this weird thing too, where he would throw it like it was a weird way he would throw that right hand, and it just never looked like it generated a lot of power. Whereas his left, dude, his left was the one thing you had to worry about: the hook, the jab, the way he'd walk you down with the jab. I mean, he just didn't pepper you up with the jab; he broke you down with that jab.
And at 147, he was just a very strong guy.
Oh, strong.
And like you said, you referenced Kell Brook. I think that's an excellent comparison because I actually see Brook as kind of a poor man's Ike Quartey.
Yeah,
he kind of uses the same defensive tactics. He likes to use the high guard. But Brook, as we have seen, is not as sturdy at 147 as Ike Quartey was.
I see a headbutt, though, with Sean Porter and Ike, because the thing is that Ike was not one of those guys that was elusive. You can hit him, but you were hitting all those gloves and elbow. And I think Sean Porter, because he's not one of those styles that's fighting in the outside. He actually mauls you up. He's going to be attacking. And I think, honestly, even though we don't see Porter tiring out from that style, but I see a lot of fouls getting in with Ike, because Ike would cover up, and then he would close that distance. And then all of a sudden, I think he would be shooting his shots around Ike, catching him in the back of the head, trying to catch him on the wrist, but he'd be catching him on the kidney. And I think that the ref would have to step in, not just once, but numerous times to separate those guys and stuff, because of that style. It's an ugly match, to tell you the truth. but I think that it goes down the stretch, and I think that Ike Quartey just busses him up with a jab and pretty much does exactly what Kell Brook did to him.
Yeah, or has Sean Porter eating one of those uppercuts, which again he was very good at. And Ike Quartey was also pretty good at taking steps back and coming back with. Oh, look at that defense right there. You see that?
Yeah.
Oh, right there. I forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, he was really good at kind of moving his head when he had to, and I was just gonna say taking a step back, and then throwing either a lead right or 1-2.
Absolutely, man. Terrence Crawford is next on the list here. Terrence Bud Crawford. What do you think, man? Interesting matchup, if you ask me, between Ike Quartey and Bud Crawford here. Does Bud Crawford switch stance puzzle or give Ike Quartey a lot of problems? Now, I'll let you go first with that.
I mean, I'm just showing my bias here. Like I said, 80s baby, grew up watching boxing in the 90s. I just do not rate this class of welterweights with the class of the 1990s welterweights. I think that class was like on a different level. And I also think that the class of obviously the 70s and even the 80s was a different level.
Right.
Having said that, I can see Bud lasting there and doing pretty well, but I don't see Ike Quartey getting overwhelmed or getting knocked out by the kind of shot that Kell Brook was overwhelmed by. And Ike Quartey had better punching power than Kell Brook, who was touching Terrence Crawford. So it's definitely going to be a good fight, but at welterweight, let's be honest. I mean, Terrence Crawford's best win is against Kell Brook. I mean, that's really all I have to go on.
And that's a damaged Kell Brook. That's not a prime and fresh
Kell Brook. Exactly.
Kell Brook, you know what? I think that, honestly, I'm going to have to go against your pick. I think that Terrence Crawford, Bud, I think he gets the edge. I think he wins that fight. I'll tell you why. Oscar De La Hoya, in his prime, who was still trying to find out who Oscar was. Oscar was still trying to find out who he was in the fight, was able to get in some good work against Ike Quartey, okay? And this wasn't a over-the-hill Ike. This wasn't a coming-up Ike. This was the prime, I have arrived Ike. Crawford, I think, would have his moments because of his temperament, The one thing about Terrence Crawford, what I like about him, is that he creates the moments, okay? And he fights at the level of his opponents, okay? And I think him going in with Ike is that he's going to probably have a much more better punching output than Ike would, that it would kind of sway the judges to pick Crawford. I think it would be controversial. I think that he would get that edge because of the American judging, and it'd probably be in Vegas. And I think that you'll end up hearing Ike Quartey complain about a robbery in that fight, which would be a very close fight, in my opinion, between the two. I like Crawford. I think that Crawford's going to have a lot of issues with the jab because he was having issues with Kell Brook's jab in the very beginning. But the thing is that Ike doesn't make those mistakes. One thing that Ike does that a lot of these kids nowadays do not do is when Ike throws a jab, he comes right back to that shell, and it's really a shield defense. It's not even a shell. It's like a freaking Trojan shield that he puts right in front of his face, and it's like you literally don't even see anywhere to hit. Like even his abs, it's very hard to find a spot. And that's what's very difficult and deceiving and discouraging, in my opinion. When you're in there, when you're in there and you're facing somebody, you kind of tend to see some skin and some vulnerable spots that you can target. With Ike Quartey, you don't really see that. But I think Crawford would create those moments to land some pretty good shots. But I think that Ike gets dropped in the fight because Ike was known to kind of get, dropped. He was sometimes off balance in the way that Tito Trinidad would be off balance and stuff. But I think it's a really, really close fight. And let me see. A-Rod put here, he said Crawford gets knocked out. He gets knocked out in that fight.
I didn't want to say that earlier.
Or he runs like crazy.
but I might as well just say it right now. I mean, we saw what the Mean Machine was able to do.
Yeah,
Mean Machine dropped him.
true.
No offense to the Mean Machine, I like the guy, but he's no Ike Quartey, and he doesn't have Ike Quartey's punching power. And Kell Brook was touching him. Terrence Crawford admitted that after the fight, and I'm sorry, but literally end of career, Kell Brook and a Jeff Horn, and we saw what happened to him against Tim Tszyu. Those two wins don't give me any confidence at all that you're going to be able to beat an Ike Quartey. And Ike Quartey, yes, was dropped. We talk about the De La Hoya fight, but he got back up. He fought well, you know.
Right.
And De La Hoya did a lot more at 147 than Terrence Crawford did. I think, yeah, it's difficult to talk about Crawford with an a great welterweight. Maybe we got to stack him up against like the top 135 or 140 pound guys.
Welterweight champion of the world, Ike Bazooka Quartey.
You know what Mike didn't get to hear was the appreciation of fight fans of his style and what he really did bring. You know, because he was a delight to watch, bro. I used to get so excited when I would hear he was in the fight. I was like, oh shit, Ike is gonna get on. You know, the bazooka's gonna be here. You know, and he didn't really get that full effect of the joy that he would bring to a lot of us fight fans of his style. You know, and he was in a hotbed of a lot of good welterweights at that time. You know, and like you mentioned right now, just different crops. You know, even when Floyd was at welterweight, remember this, he retired because there was so much talent in the welterweight division that he had to let those guys weed each other out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't his welterweight debut Shambe Mitchell?
Yes.
I mean, that says all you need to know.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, and I think that if Ike was there, he we would have fought everybody because he was trying to prove he was the best. And at least somebody agrees with me over here. Jesus says Crawford wins. He beats Ike. Crawford beats Ike Quartey if they were to have met in 2020. But let's get down to Errol Spence Jr., the champ, the one that everybody considers the number one guy who has the number one spot, but doesn't really want to look like he wants to show us he's the number one guy by not facing Terrence Crawford. Doesn't really have a lot of bass in his voice when Crawford is brought up in any type of interview. What do you think, man? Errol Spence Jr., does he have problems, or do we get to see a Spence be so dominant against Ike Quartey the way he did against Danny Garcia, against Mikey Garcia, and against and where he struggled against Sean Porter? What do you think?
Could you repeat what you said? What was the number of the spot that Errol Spence has? Can you repeat that?
Number one. The number one spot is what he said. Are you playing something in the background? Is that why you're shaking your head? Because I don't hear anything.
Yeah. Maybe it didn't go through.
No, let me hear it. Come on, try it again.
I don't know why it didn't go through. Hold on, let me try it again. I don't know what happened.
I'm gonna say I'll put something up for number one spot. Here it is.
Stupid! You're so stupid!
I was actually playing number one spot by Ludacris.
Oh man.
Don't know what happened there. It would have been a great filler right there. Yes, he does have the number one spot. Shout out to Ludacris. But Terrence Crawford can't lay claim to that because he has not beat at welterweight the guys that Errol Spence has beat at welterweight, other than Kell Brook.
I think he wants that fight. I think Spence is the one that's now holding things.
No, I agree. I agree he wants the fight, but Spence isn't giving it to him.
No.
And if he is giving it to him, it's at 70-30, which I don't think Crawford wants. And an argument could be made there that maybe he should just take the fight at 70-30 and then get his money in the rematch, just reverse it. But I don't know what the possibilities of that are. Errol Spence Jr., no, I'm sorry, he does not beat Ike Quartey.
Ooh, really?
No.
You know, the thing about Spence here is that he's nothing. He doesn't mirror anything of Sean Porter, Pacquiao, or Crawford. He is a controlled, disciplined fighter of what we've seen.
He is.
I don't
He
see
is.
I don't see Ike landing that jab at will as he would against the three other guys we just mentioned right now. I think anything that it would be Ike, he would have to pressure the action here, which he has never had a problem doing. But that would actually leave chances for Spence to counter. You know, the thing with Spence, though, he's not really a counter puncher. He's a puncher that creates the countering shots. And what I mean by that is he throws punches. They're not really throwaway punches, but there's punches where he does something and then he waits for the other guy because he knows the timing is going to be the other guy's going to wait for him to finish, and they're hoping that Spence is going to stay around for a receipt and they're going to shoot a shot. Spence knows that. He does his shots. He sits there, lets the guy try to counter him, and then he counters the counter. I love when he does that, you know. So I tend to think that he gives Ike some problems. This is something where Ike would have to really, really dig deep down the way he did against Oscar De La Hoya, and the same thing with Lopez in those last 3 rounds. You know, he had to dig down deep to show who he really was, and I don't think he'll have a problem with that. But I do think that Spence brings out the best and the worst of Ike Quartey if they would have met in 2020.
I can definitely see that. The fight I point to in my mind is the Kell Brook fight. Kell Brook was actually doing pretty well in that fight before his eye gave out. It was a really good fight, and he was touching Errol Spence Jr. and obviously getting touched himself. But like I said earlier, he's a poor man's Ike Quartey. He's not as sturdy as Ike Quartey. He may match him in terms of his hand speed, but I mean, the accuracy of Ike Quartey's shots, I mean, they both like that kind of uppercut. They both kind of piston out their jabs. I just think that Ike Quartey has the proven that he's got the edge there in power, and more importantly, that he has the edge there in sturdiness. And then I could see Errol Spence winning if he fights a very tactical fight and is content with going the distance and kind of being a little bit boring, as I thought he was against Garcia. Not Danny, but
Mikey.
Shit, with Mikey. Thank you. Let's get
I'm just gonna really quick before I forget my thought here about what you were saying. You know, the one thing about Spence is that nobody's pointing out and nobody's kind of appreciated and kind of talks about is we talked about this. I love the way that Spence jabs to the solar plex. It pauses their opponents. He did it to Danny Garcia numerous times. I think he does it over and over to Ike, which makes Ike kind of have to rush in, But I think he stops Ike in his tracks a lot because of that high guard, and because Ike was not one to have. He didn't really have fast feet. He kind of walked you down. He would really need those fast feet to close distance with Spence. And I think that what Spence would do, he's a very intelligent fighter. I think that he just shoots his jab always to the center solar plex of Ike Quartey, and it keeps him always at the end of his punches. Really interesting fight. But before I tell you who I think wins that one, let's get into our caller.
Yeah, I'm going to call him up right now. I don't know why it wasn't going through because I tested it on my cell phone and I was going through. So that one's going to remain a mystery. I also texted the number from my cell phone and it went through as well. But yeah, let's get him on right now. I'm going to call him up. I'm going to call him in, and this is Philly that we're calling in here
from the Shoe Shine.
Let's go right here.
If you guys want to call in, certainly can. 347-460-1773. We're going to talk some boxing. Of course, we're going to get into that there, Jesus. We're going to bring up, right after the Stack Up Show, we're going to go right into the hour of Leaving the Ring.
Philly? Is that Philly on the line? Hello? Can you hear him, Dave?
I don't hear nothing, bro.
That's weird.
I do not hear anything on my end. But you got Ike Quartey winning this fight against Errol Spence Jr., right? Is that what you said?
I'll tell him I'll call him right back. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Sorry about that, Philly. I'll try again. Something's clearly off with my my sound settings because earlier on when I tried to mix in the Ludacris, it didn't go through, and now I can't hear his.
Right?
Yeah, now I can't hear his voice. So just give me a moment to troubleshoot, Dave, while you continue on.
He said he heard you. So it's technical difficulties over here on leaving.
He heard
We'll
me.
get it all ready to go.
He heard me, and I heard him. So the question is why
we couldn't hear him over the air, though. Unfortunately.
Okay, so let me troubleshoot this.
So I'm going to tell you what I think here, what happens between Errol Spence Jr. and Ike Quartey. They have met each other on 2020. I honestly think that Errol Spence would probably get the edge of a very close and probably really boring fight. I think Spence would honestly be happy of staying on the outside and moving, where Ike Quartey would have to find him. I think that Errol Spence would immediately, right away, in the beginning of the first 3 rounds, would recognize that he was not going to out-jab Ike Quartey or match him, match jab with Ike Quartey. So his best option would be jab to the stomach, and occasionally throw a right hand. And then when Ike shelled up, got in that high guard, I could see Spence opening up a little bit, but then getting caught. So he would do them just like seldomly. He wouldn't do it a whole lot, in my opinion, man. So yeah, most definitely. You got Ike Quartey. I got Spence on that one there. And this was an edition of the Stack Up Show here on Leaving the Room. We're planning to do a little bit more of that. Let us know what fighters you want us to put on here to do some comparisons and our picks or our thoughts about.
Could you just hear that phone ringing there, David?
No, I can't hear anything, brother. I can only hear you. I can only hear your smoothing voice, that Barry White voice of yours. Hey, baby. Shit. Oh, all right. Let's go. Let's get into the current events. Now that we're done with the fantasy fights here on the Stack Up Show, which we had Joe Calzaghe. We talked about Joe Calzaghe against a crop of 168 fighters. If you missed what we said about them, don't worry about it. You'll catch it on the archive. And Ike Quartey, okay, the bazooka. We talked about how would he match up? How would he stack up against the guys that are current at 147? All right, so if you missed any of that, don't worry about it. You can catch it on the replay here. But let's go. Bang. Here we are.
Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros, leave it in the ring.
Woo, so much to talk about, man. There is so much to talk about here on Leave It in the Ring. You know, it's crazy because I had called up Amilcar yesterday, and I was like, yeah, dude, there's not a lot of stuff to talk about. What the fuck was I thinking, dude? What was I on, Amilcar?
I was tired, and I didn't even pick up on it myself, to be honest. But yeah, we've got a big fight. This weekend.
It don't even seem like it. You know, and there's been a lot of build up to this fight. This is a fight that I was really been like super excited. We got Garcia versus Campbell coming up this weekend. We got to talk about James Mandingo Kirtland. He's got to retire. And then we got to talk about Mark Kriegel's excuse for Lomachenko not winning that title, not retaining his title against Teofimo Lopez. And there's a bunch of other stuff. You know, we got to talk about Sergio Martinez. We got to talk about Sean Porter, talking about Terrence Crawford. There's a lot of stuff here to talk about. Hopefully we can get these phone lines figured out here on Leaving the Ring, and we could talk some boxing here. Oh, man, I got the old line number up. I apologize for that. Sorry about that, guys. So we're just going to have to put that in the chat room. I'll have Amilcar put that in the chat room if you want to call in, because I got the old number up.
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Man. So I apologize. I thought I updated it. What happened here? Jesus. All right. Let's see really quick. Shoeshine here. Dave 408 says, Sergio Martinez versus GG someday, please. Someday, please. I think it could happen, but I think Gennady Golovkin's got to move up. He's got to make that jump. Even Canelo and Eddie Reynoso had said already, hey, that fight's still feasible, but he's got to come up. 168, which I'm not sure that, Gennady Golovkin wants to do. I'm not sure about that. He hasn't tested the waters of moving up. So, yeah. Nato says, Ike Quartey versus De La Hoya's biggest victory. Hell of a fight. Dude, that was a phenomenal welterweight fight. Too bad they didn't do it again.
I think I agree with that. I think it's his biggest victory as well.
A-Rod wants us to talk about on the Stack Up show Trinidad versus Charlo. We'll definitely get up Trinidad, dude. I think, man, that would be fun to talk about. Even at 147 and 140, even at 160, I think there's a lot to talk about there. With Tito Trinidad, the great Tito Trinidad and stuff. Now, though, Calzaghe was an artist in the ring, heavily influenced by his father. Absolutely, we did talk about that there on the Stack Up show. But let's move on. Let's talk about Ryan Kingring. I don't even know, how do you even say his nickname, dude?
I think it's King Rye, David.
King Rye. There you go. King Rye Garcia. These kids, man, they come up with these weird nicknames. They don't got not like the way we used to do back, a 90 babies and stuff, Flaco, 97 rough.
Yeah.
Blood. Even look at D-Style. That's all those are all MC names. Coming to the mic.
Yeah, they are actually.
G-Funk, T-Funky.
Now you mentioned it.
Even Chicano Prophet. Chicano Prophet is like a straight up B-boy nickname. But King Rye sounds like the rye bread. Can I have one of those? Can I have a marble rye? Thank you. That's what it sounds like to me and stuff. But okay, so King Rye Garcia versus Luke Campbell. Let's get down to the breakdown. I didn't even look up to see the odds on that, the betting odds, man. Did you have a chance to check that out? Do we know what the betting odds are?
I have not, David, but I will look at them as soon as I get the phone line sorted, which I'm about 30 seconds away from.
Okay, so I'll wait on that. And so what I'll talk about is about Sergio Martinez, shoe shine boxing. That's crazy Sergio's still fighting. I meant Stack Up. Prime, that's what he's talking about. Put him in the Stack Up. Prime Sergio versus Triple G at 160. But here we are at 2020. Sergio is back. Yes, it is kind of crazy. I was talking to Brian Fogg about this. This is a couple of weeks back when Sergio Martinez was having that announcement. And even seeing his last fight, where they ended up, I believe it was like a headbutt or something like that. And he was doing actually really, 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 really good. He was saying the thing with Sergio is how is his body back? Because that was the only thing that was preventing him to keep moving forward in his career. Remember this, he had so many surgeries, even leading up into the Miguel Cotto fight. This guy was going in with a bad hip, a bad knee.
The bad knee was terrible. Yeah,
his knee, yeah. I mean, it had to be reconstructed. So how realistic is it for Sergio Martinez to get back into any type of real talks of him facing any elite fighter at this moment? I still think it's kind of a fetched dream. It's something that he's chasing. Is it about money, or is it about that he felt like his legacy shouldn't have ended by losing to a smaller man in Miguel Cotto at 160? I think there's a little bit of both, man. I think there's a little bit of both of that there when it comes to Sergio Martinez, which I truly believe was just one of the greatest middleweights out there. You can argue with me about it all you want. Even some people will try to even argue with us about that. He ducked Gennady Golovkin, which is kind of hilarious because Gennady was not even on anybody's radar. And
I've heard people say that before. I just don't get it.
I don't get it either.
How do you duck the WBA regular IBO champion? It just doesn't make much sense to me.
And also, he was a prospect, hadn't done anything. Okay, well, he was breaking out of the prospect, circle, but he hadn't done anything. And it was really why would Sergio Martinez face that guy? It was like I said, I'll go back in. It wasn't even in the radar. Where he was able to go to his home country, make a shitload of money, okay, and or he was gonna opt to go fight Gennady Golovkin, who really wasn't ready for the world to witness. Nobody honestly knew about Gennady Golovkin unless you were a really, really hardcore fan. I mean, I go again. I've had I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 different interviews with Gennady Golovkin in that period of time that everybody was saying that Sergio Martinez was ducking him, and not once in those interviews or anytime in the Gmails anybody ever mentioned him going to face Sergio Martinez or Martinez facing Gennady Golovkin. I mean, Abel Sanchez and Gennady at that time were talking about everybody from 154 to 168, saying that they can go to any weight division. They were willing to do that, but they've never done it. So, yeah, I always thought that was kind of strange.
Yeah, and obviously he had fights that at that point would have brought him more notoriety and more money. And I don't think anyone should ever accuse Sergio of ducking fights. I mean, he took on pretty much everyone that was placed in front of him and fought very well, against people. So yeah, I mean, look at what he did to Paul Williams. That knockout's always going to be in my memory.
And they predicted it from the rematch.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: is the first match I predicted that it was going to end up in controversy, and it ended up being just that. But that second fight, when they brought out the crown, and he made Paul Williams go, head first into the canvas. Nobody had ever done that to Paul Williams. Nobody had ever really seen Paul Williams hurt, and Sergio Martinez was able to do that. But he's doing this comeback campaign here. And it's great to see him there. He's actually he's hoping to get Mariota, Japanese fighter, at 168. He's willing to go. What I'm hearing, he's willing to go over there to face him later on this year. I don't think that's a bad fight, but I don't think he could win that fight if his body is not recuperated to where it needs to be here, Abdulkar. I mean, Mariota's a big guy, and he's a good fighter. He's not a slouch, but he's not much talked about.
Let's see if we can hear a caller now. We just had a caller call in. Hello, caller. Can you hear me? Hello. I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah, I don't hear nothing.
I've been working at this. I can hear you, but apparently Dave can't hear you and you can't hear me.
Don't worry. We'll figure it out on next show.
Sorry about that, my brother. It's my fault. There's something going on with my mixer that has not happened before. Yeah,
Shoeshine Boxing, Sergio and Dmitry Pirog never happened. People forget about what Pirog did to Danny Jacobs. They absolutely did. There was a lot of management problems in Pirog's part. He was fighting in his home country, just couldn't seem to get over here overseas. So that was really shit. I remember when we had Pirog on the show, and I remember the frustration in their part where they couldn't get nothing going. It's not. And you know what's crazy is that, I always see people go well, if this so-and-so fighter beats the star, he automatically becomes a star. And I was like, that's not necessarily how things really go,
Well, ask Rigo about that.
Absolutely.
Rigo about that.
The only ones, Gilbert says, the only ones that say that is Steve Kim and his parakeet followers. It's, you know what? Steve and his listeners, they definitely had a very, a big resentment towards Sergio Martinez. We always used to make fun of that. I don't know what it is. I don't know why Steve didn't. I think now, though, Steve appreciates him. But before he did it.
That actually surprises me.
Yeah, Steve really didn't have there was not a special place in Steve's heart for Sergio Martinez. But now I see Steve tweeting about him. And shows the appreciation. I think where Steve was at was people, I don't know. He was always riding the Gennady Golovkin train, so didn't want to disappoint his listeners there. Because that was definitely when you have a certain cult followers, you don't want them
I remember there was
turn
a guy
against them.
from Australia that would call into the next round on the Leave It in the Ring radio network, and he had Triple G in his name or something. It was. That they're Triple G.
I blocked that guy on Twitter. Yeah, he was, dude. It was
Triple G definitely has his hard. I mean, when you're naming yourself after a current fighter, you're a pretty hardcore fan.
He had Triple G culture as his description on his Twitter handle thing. Okay,
wow. That
says it all for me. When I saw that, and I was, I think it was because of the Danny Jacobs fight. And this guy was like, no, he won, it was a clean win, blah, 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 blah. And remember when Gennady Golovkin and Abel Sanchez were complaining about his, that they couldn't get on the plane because they were super sore? And I'm like, yeah, that's because you were taking a lot of shots. You don't get super sore, from not taking any shots. So But yeah, that's here and there, man. But yeah, so going back to that, like Sergio Martinez, is it a good fight for him? What do you think, man? You think Murrieta is a good fight for Sergio Martinez? Is that a fight he should really pursue, or should he just
Um,
hang it up?
honestly, I think he should just hang it
Do
up.
you think he's going to end up
Um,
becoming like he's going to get Kirtland in
I
the
hope
ring?
not. I actually did a video on that on Sunday. Unfortunately, my sound wasn't working, and I'm starting to think it's the mixing board that I'm also using for these calls.
Mm.
I did the damn thing 3 times, and none of the times was it uploading with audio. Funny enough, when I played a sound file, it did. But yeah, I don't think that he should be fighting still. I'm sorry. Um, hopefully, he's retired with enough money and he's not financially strapped. Um, but yeah,
It's
I don't
it's
need to, I don't need to see him fighting anymore.
it's kind of sad because like when you think of that financially for fighters, Tyson had a great quote about fighters mishandling money. He said this on Howard Stern, which if you know me, I'm a huge Howard Stern fan been listening to the guy since the '80s.
Yeah,
But he was on there, and Howard Stern had asked Mike Tyson, like, how did you lose all this money? And Mike said, look, a lot of fighters, including himself, and you could say this about a lot of the guys now that are still pursuing the chase of glory and money, the yellow brick road. Mike said this about them, saying there's an art to handling money, and a lot of fighters we just don't know how to handle it. We don't know that art form, and it's so
especially
true.
people who grew up in poverty
In
too.
poverty, yeah, James Kirtland comes to mind. Here we saw him on Saturday night. James Mandigo Kirtland. Here was a guy at 154. Um, you know, just looked like pure doomsday to anybody. Ask El Perro Angulo, Alfredo Angulo, who stepped in there and gave us a phenomenal back and forth war between the two, but ended up getting the short stick from James Kirtland. James Kirtland outside of the ring had so many problems. One was getting in the ring. One was, his up and down relationship with the great Ann Wolf. And the layoffs, the blowing up in between fights. And I've always said this about certain fighters. They always seem to, when it's kind of a little too late to get back what they once had, like they finally hold them down and they go like, okay, I need to get serious. But it's gone and past. The hourglass is empty for you. And Saturday night was that certain case for James Mandingo Kirtland. He gets in there and he gets starched again in the first round. The way he did against, what's the name of the Japanese kid that did it with him? It was off a jab. And this was actually a much more primed Kirtland the first time when he had an upset loss. He gets in there, and again, man, he just gets blown out. And I actually thought he was getting punished a lot more than he should have. I thought the ref should have done his job and jumped in and saw immediately he didn't have his legs underneath him. You could see his eyes were glossy. James Kirtland is a fighter. He was willing to go back at it. But what was alarming was after they finally stopped and the ref finally stepped in and waved it off, was he said, what happened? Did you hear that, Amilcar? Or anybody? He said, what happened? He didn't know
Yeah,
what
I'm
happened.
very sad. And sorry, I was trying to get this thing sorted so we could at least get some callers. I know people have been wanting to call in. But yeah, honestly, I haven't wanted to see Kirkland again since the Canelo fight, really. The way he went out, the length of time he was out. Once I see a guy get knocked out like that, it's usually the sign of the end. And
This is
it
the
just
end.
really wasn't nice to watch.
Oh, it wasn't.
And honestly, people who care about boxers really shouldn't be trying to get these guys to continue along those lines. And like you said, that was all after already being knocked out by Nobihiro, I think, Ushida.
Oshida, yes.
Yeah, who knocked him out off a jab. So but the Saul Canelo Alvarez knockout was really all I needed to know to say I really don't want to see this guy fight anymore.
Oh, God, dude, that was like so. unnecessary. But when fighters have contracts and fighters on those contracts they're subjected to an amount of fights that they have to produce because they're under contract of fighting for what they signed for. That's the case there. Well, here's a good question. Let me get to this question here from Nado. He said, "Who's the biggest waste of talent? James Kirtland, Edwin Bellario, or Ike Buche?" That's a good. What do you think?
Ike Ibeabuchi.
The president?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just off of the stories I've heard about him.
Brian Fogg interviewed his manager. It was on when we had a Leave It Ring website, and that was a hell of an interview, dude. And it was crazy that Ike, the president, his train thought of the way things, because of where he was from, was so distorted. Like, even for his own country, it was so distorted. You know what I mean? Comes over here and he kind of felt like, I could do what I want. Like, what's wrong what I'm doing? He never comprehended, like, the things he was doing was not, like, you can't do that, bro. It's a crime. But yeah, I agree with you. Ike is there, Edwin's death was definitely tragic, but that was another very tortured soul. The guy wanted to fight. He was banned. He had to go to Japan. He had to fight out there. Came back. Golden Boy tried everything they could to get him USA fights. He struggled with drugs. And the same thing with James Kirtland. The guy struggled with a lot of stuff. He was self-destructive. All three of these fighters were very self-destructive.
Yeah, and the only reason I really say Ike Ibeabuchi over the others is because obviously he's a heavyweight too.
Right.
And, like I said, from what I heard, this guy was like a wolf. We know he was a savage. Remember the Tua fight?
Oh, dude, yeah. No, actually, Gilbert just brought it up right now here in the chat room. Greatest heavyweight fight was Tua and Ike.
I'm still working away at this. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. The Tua fight was all you really needed to know about where this guy potentially was going to be able to go.
Nope, I definitely agree, man. Well, when you're looking to try to fix that, I gotta definitely start to touch on what Mark Kriegel started saying on a segment on ESPN. Let me look it up here. I got it down here, and first off, Lomachenko hasn't been so graceful about his loss over Teofimo Lopez. He wasn't when Salcido beat him. He definitely couldn't accept it. He had a lot of issues on it. But let me put down
upping the level of risk so he could demonstrate his greatness.
Here, let me see if I can get it up here on the overlay. Give me 1 second here. Bring it back, and then tell me what you think, man.
Because you want to fight at 135. You're a lightweight, but he's not a natural lightweight. And what Lomachenko found himself doing was upping the level of risk so he could demonstrate his greatness. And I know Dre disagrees with me.
No.
But he kept upping the level of risk to demonstrate something that would last for all time. And eventually, he upped it too much.
Yeah,
and he fell.
I'll give Lomachenko the credit for taking the fight. But I hear you, but we cannot give him that. We can't say that this guy is all everything.
Yep.
And then say, but it didn't work out his way, and that's because
he
was
the
favorite too. He was the favorite in the fight too. At a weight
That's exactly what he's doing.
He was the favorite in the fight. If you campaign at a weight class, you are in that weight class, whether it goes good or bad. Because if he won the fight, we weren't going to say he was the smaller guy.
What I'm saying is that
all the greats have to do that.
I understand that.
I understand that. I understand that. If you understand that, then what are you complaining about?
But he's not a natural lightweight.
I don't get that, Mark.
Facts.
The thing is, like, he was the man to beat at lightweight. He had the titles. Okay, he was the champion. So I trip out when I see a lot of these tribal fans coming out and defending a fighter solely because you can't accept it as much as this guy can't accept it. Okay, like, and I said this to you. I even said this in a tweet to G Funky. I was like, yeah, for sure there, Nato. He did get the win there, man. That was what you call an Andre Ward jab. He jabbed him where he made him rethink about his stance of his argument. But I was saying to G Funky, I was like, okay, if that's the logic that you're using, then you know what? Then they should not count the win they have over like Rigondeaux, who had to jump like literally 3 or 2 weight classes to face.
Yeah, I was just about to say that.
Right?
I mean, Rigo's a natural 118 pounder. We know that because now at age 39, that's where he's fighting. Okay. It's very rare for people to go down in weight as they age. It's because he was always a natural 118 pounder, right? A natural bantamweight.
Right.
And he actually moved all the way up to 130 to fight Lomachenko. Where was the compassion and the empathy and the sympathy for?
Why don't you hear Lomachenko fans saying, "Well, you know, this guy moved up and he got the win, and it's really we shouldn't really count it." Well, Mark Kriegel, that's what I'm hearing. Like, well, we shouldn't really count this loss here because you know he wasn't a natural lightweight. What the fuck was your man doing in that division then in the first place? Why were we so excited? You know, rather than
he's also calling himself a champion.
Exactly. You know, and which again, I've never understood why we make excuses for fighters. I've always said if you sign on the dotted line, you're gonna have to go out there, and if you don't have a good performance, you know, sometimes it's just not your night. For Lomachenko, you went out there with a wrong game plan. No, actually, you went in there with a good game plan. You were hoping that Teofimo Lopez, the takeover, was gonna tire out. You thought I could tire him out, and then I could impose my will over you and take the fight. And it looked like that was happening in those late rounds there, Amilcar. You can't not unsee what we watched the night they stepped in October and tell me that this guy looked like he had no business in there with Teofimo Lopez. I mean, he did. He looked like he had no business in there for the first, 8 rounds. But later, he started stepping it up when he started actually letting his hands go. But he became subjective of any engagement when he felt the power of Teofimo Lopez in that first round. Mark Kriegel, if you're going to – and I like Mark Kriegel, first off, okay? I like him as a journalist because he actually goes out and goes to the gyms and he talks to fighters. He's been on the beat for a long time. But, Mark, that should be your argument is that, you know what? Vasily Lomachenko was not the better man that night.
No, he was not the better man last night.
What did the kids say? Period. Period. Period.
Yeah. Or they might say that was all cap from Mark Kriegel, you know.
Cap, Mark. Here's another thing. Yeah. Lomo isn't moving down to weight, pride, money, and big fights still at lightweight. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if we're going to go on Lomachenko, I got to go in a little bit on Teofimo Lopez. I know that my fam, everybody here that joins us and listens to us we love Teofimo Lopez. He's the man. He's the it factor. He's the takeover. But you know what? I'm starting to he's a shit talker. But, dude, I don't know what it is right now where I saw him immediately after. Tell me if I'm wrong here, guys. Tell me if I'm out of pocket for even thinking this or even believing this, okay? But he's immediately after the fight of Canelo versus Smith, he's standing there and he's talking to the fans. And I don't know who he was talking to, but a police officer screamed out from the sidelines, "Hey, Teo, fight Lomachenko, shut him up." And Teofimo Lopez was like, "No, why should I give him he wasn't going to give me a rematch. Why should I give him a rematch?" And it's not the first time he has said this. He said this on other platforms and in front of other fans have asked him, are you going to fight Lomachenko again in the rematch? And even some of his followers, his hardcore followers now, the takeover crowd are in agreement with him. Like, yeah, he shouldn't give him a rematch. I'm starting to wonder, does he really feel like he won this fight based on solely skill? Or does he feel like he got lucky on that fight? Because
I think he might feel like a lot of people feel, which is that Loma fought the wrong strategy and was too afraid to get hurt and felt that he had the experience to beat him in the later rounds, which he clearly did do well in the later rounds, but it wasn't enough to make up for obviously the rounds that he had given up early on.
Right.
But the guy that knows better than any one of us is Teo. He was in there with them.
Yeah,
and we can only judge him by what he's been saying, and whether it's to the police officer at AT&T Stadium or whether it's the Max Kellerman on Max on Boxing, he's been clear about the fact that he does not want a rematch with Loma.
And that's just such a turn off, and I'll tell you why, because as a champion, you know, why wouldn't you want to? I mean, unless he's like saying, listen, there's other big fish out there to fry. You know, Devin Haney, definitely the winner of Garcia and Campbell, which we're going to talk about here in the hour of Leaving the Ring. In terms of big money, is it wrong for me to still think that there's a lot of money to be made in a rematch with Lomachenko? And is it wrong for me to think that other champions have given other opponents who they clearly beat the opportunity in a match? Comes to mind right away is like, you imagine a Roberto Duran who had just beat the Golden Child, Leonard,
in Montreal at the Olympic Stadium in front of, what was it, like 80,000 people?
Yeah, you imagine him saying, I don't want to give him a rematch. I'm not fighting him again. The backlash.
The only thing he wanted was a training camp that was long enough to let him lose the 200 pounds he was weighing.
That was the only thing. And honestly, that was the only thing he brought up. He never brought up, like, this guy shouldn't get another match. This guy, da-da-da. You imagine the fighters in the 80s and 90s talking like that? You know, the turn of how these fighters nowadays converse with us fans, hardcore fans, okay, is really different, you know? Like you shouldn't be left up to that decision of whether you fight this guy again. It should be, do the numbers make it, and do the public, do they want to see it? And the more he talks like this, I got to tell you, bro, I want to see this. I want to see a rematch really bad. Not just because of what he's saying by saying, I don't want a rematch, he doesn't deserve a rematch. Also because Lomo has been crying so much. He's entered the Deontay Wilder conspiracy world so bad that I'm like, dude, this makes for a good match. Am I missing something here? Guys, I mean, you know, I wish we could get some calls in about this, man, but I'm actually
going to try to bring in a caller right now, Dave, now that you mention it. I'm going to try to go through Bluetooth on my mixer because the USB, for whatever reason,
I agree with Nato here, too. He said, I agree with Dave somewhat. Okay, and that's very rare that Nato agrees with me. Never agrees with me. Lomo deserves a rematch, but doesn't need it immediately. I agree with that. I think Lomo should fight.
Can you hear us? Hello? Yeah, there's
something wrong with the mix board. No worries, man.
With my board. I'm sorry, Dave. I've done everything I can over here.
No worries. We got so much here to talk about. There's no biggie. Yeah. I would worry about those phone lines later. But going back to my thought about what Nato said, Fernando had said here, about the immediate match. I agree with you, Nato. I think, like, you know, Shakur Stevenson is really talking a lot about Lomachenko. Even now, he's even like propping himself up of being better without even proving it. Without even proving it by saying that he would completely beat down Lomachenko worse than what Teofimo Lopez was able to do. I would love to see that fight happen, and they're both under the same banner. My problem is, though, is Lomachenko too far down the rabbit hole the way Deontay Wilder. Now Deontay Wilder's talking about fighting other guys because I think he's starting to see the light at that tunnel that he may not get the Tyson Fury fight because there's a major roadblock there in the name of Anthony Joshua, right? When does Lomachenko start seeing that roadblock in the fact that he may not get that opportunity because there is a big money fight there with Campbell versus Garcia? That is a big fight there, and it's an interesting fight.
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, and this is kind of going to go counter to what we've been saying, but when it comes to Loma in this rematch, to me, it's you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I don't think Mr. Gary Russell Jr. got a rematch, and he's been screaming for a rematch for years. And that wasn't a unanimous decision. That was a majority decision. And I'd like everyone who can and who has the time to check out his interview with Brian Custer. I thought it was very good. I checked it out over the weekend, and he basically outlined all of the issues he had going into that fight, beginning with the back-to-back sauna sessions he had to do, and how he just at that time didn't have the knowledge about kind of losing weight the right way. He's been screaming for that rematch with Loma for years, and he hasn't got it. And so I kind of find it ironic now that Loma's chasing the rematch now when he hasn't given a guy a rematch. But I do think that Teo should give him a rematch. But I also think that he should be rematching Gary Russell Jr.
I think so too. Well, I don't know. Gary Russell fights once a year.
According to them, that's because they're saving the PBC fighters and they don't want them to fight him. He's with the PBC,
right?
And they haven't wanted him to take on a Santa Cruz, who's very protected, or Mayweather. He's been calling for a Tank fight. He's been saying he'll school Tank, especially if it's at 130, and that's honestly a big fight for the Baltimore DC kind of area, right?
Right.
It's definitely a rival there, and Tank is avoiding that fight. He says Gary Russell Jr. doesn't have a name, so people don't want to fight him.
No, I mean, look, this is where Gary Russell though is. This is where he's wrong. Gary Russell Jr. Same thing with like Lomachenko. Same thing with Deontay Wilder. What they're doing wrong. Really quick, Andre Rodriguez. Lomachenko is still a big name out there. A guy that all the great fighters wants to fight. I think of all this talk from him is a desperate attempt to get a rematch, which is something Teo wouldn't do. We've been talking about that for quite some time. I think it's a tactic that he's using to get underneath the skin of Teofimo Lopez, but it doesn't look like it's working. But let me go back to what I was going to talk about here, okay?
Yeah, all right.
This is my thing. A lot of times, and if you go back to, let's go back to the current era of what we really watch, okay? I'm a 70 baby. I was in the 80s and 90s, okay? But a lot of these guys, what they did in that time, if they wanted to solidify a fight or they wanted a fight because they lost, what they did is they cornered that fighter to give him no choice. And what I mean by that, the only fighter that I see right now that follows that model is Sean Porter. And that's why I like Sean Porter. Sean Porter loses to Errol Spence. What does he do? He starts fighting everybody else. Like he wanted Keith Thurman. He fought everybody else so that it just end up that you have to fight this guy. There's no way around it anymore. That's, you know what I mean? He's the last man standing. You have to do that. I think that's what Lomachenko's got to do here, in my opinion, okay? I get it. You want the rematch. I get it. Keep talking the craziness that you're saying, okay? Keep convincing, everybody, even the hardest cores of the Teofimo fans, keep talking and trying to convince them that it's your man that doesn't want to have that rematch. It's your man that is shying away of seeing how great he is. Keep doing that. But at the same time, don't waste your whole career on just that and not fight anybody. You got Shakur Stevenson. You got Devin Haney. Those guys, go out there, take those assignments so that you could see, like you can go back and see, like, okay, Lopez, you're going to fight these guys. Why? Why would you fight my leftovers? Here I am. I'm still standing. The great, Lamada, you getting his ass handed to him, cut up all over the place, the Valentine Massacre. What did he say to Ray Robinson? Hey, Ray, I'm still standing. I'm still here, Ray. You never took me down. You never got me down, Ray. That's what Lomachenko's got to do. You never got me down, and you were supposed to be the power puncher on that night. Go that route.
Yeah. We'll see if it works for him. I got to correct something that Andre Rodriguez said. He said Gary Russell is a guy that fights once per year. A fighter without a belt that only fights 1 to 12 months is something hard to understand. Well, he actually does have a belt. He's the WBC featherweight champion. And as I alluded to earlier, I mean, I'm only getting this from him. He says that the PBC is protecting its fighters from him.
Which I'm not surprised.
I just don't think that the PBC really wants to have their fighters lose to Gary Russell Jr. And
which is
all that he
strange.
gets are guys who I think are pretty good opponents. I mean, I think King Tug was a pretty good opponent.
Oh yeah, we were up.
You know,
I mean, big on that fight.
I can't complain that he's complain about the fact that he's taking on these mandatories. I guess you could say that he should do kind of what a James Toney did back in the day, which is take on your championship mandatories, and then between that, fight a lot of tune-up fights. But he's been trying to get fights with Tank. He's been trying to get fights with Haney. He's been trying to get fights with Shakur. None of these guys will fight him. So it is what it is.
Well, that goes back to saying, I mean, well, like you said, he's saying it's PBC. Al Heyman is putting the roadblock there. That kind of sucks. That sucks for him. But I go back to,
you wanted to get to the big fight on Saturday, right, Dave?
Let's talk about the big fight here.
We got a few minutes left, and we can get into that.
Let's definitely get into the Ryan Garcia versus Campbell. I don't know the odds on that, guys. I'm sorry I didn't pull it up and stuff. I've been talking my ass off here. It is a talk show. So, and we were trying to figure out the phone lines here and stuff like that. But if you want to put on your pick, get it on the record, certainly do. Throw it up here on the chat room, and we'll put it up there. Okay, let's break down this fight here between Ryan King Ray, whatever the hell you call his nickname and stuff. King Rye, Rye Bread. Garcia versus Luke Campbell. Right. Let me go with you here, Amoka. What do you think about this fight, man? Kuhan Luke.
I think it's a very good fight, and it's also a fight that I'm looking forward to. I was telling you this earlier. I like Ryan Garcia's style. Mm-hmm. I like his quick hands. Mm-hmm. I love his hooks.
Yes.
I kind of like the way he boxes tall. I do feel like he leaves his chin exposed a little bit too much sometimes. But he has yet to face a guy with the pedigree of Luke Campbell. And that's what makes for an interesting fight. It's a crossroads fight. Luke Campbell is trying to finally get a crack at a world title and win. All right. This is an interim title. I don't even know why the WBC has this as an interim title, because at this point they got two other belts that are active in this division: the franchise belt and the belt held by Haney. So I'm guessing the winner of this faces Haney. But as I was telling you before the show, I do think that Reynoso has improved Garcia to the extent that I was very surprised with the way he blasted out Duno and Fonseca. I was not expecting that.
Right. I don't think any of us were expecting that. You got to be impressed by that.
I just wasn't. Now let's see how that improvement or training translates over the course of what could be a 12-round fight. I think this will definitely answer those questions. And this is why this fight is intriguing. I don't really know how much more adjustments Luke Campbell is going to be making. If I think that Shane McGuigan, the son of the great Barry McGuigan, is training him now. Very young trainer, probably around the same age as like Ben Davidson, one of the young kind of up and coming English trainers out there. And we'll see what kind of a game plan he molds for Luke Campbell, and whether or not they've worked out different things and are going to work on different things in the ring. So many questions are going to be answered in this fight, which is why I'm very much looking forward to it. Luke Campbell is obviously a bit shorter, but he's got a 71-inch reach. Ryan Garcia has a 70-inch reach, so he's an inch taller but an inch less reach. Like I said about the Tanaka Ioka fight that's taking place in Japan, New Year's Eve, I think the jab is going to be key in this fight. Establishing the jab is going to be key for both of these guys.
I agree with that. I had some thoughts about Teofimo Lopez, really quick before I even lose that. I got to go back on this Teofimo Lopez thing, man. I really do. I really do.
He's holding space in your head, man.
I know he did the takeover. He's done the takeover.
He has real estate in your head.
He's done the takeover here on Leaving the Ring, man.
We're leaving in the ring, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think he's afraid. Let me point that out. I don't think Teofimo Lopez is afraid to give Lomachenko a rematch, but I think what he is trying to do is not what everybody else has done, is give somebody an immediate rematch. We could possibly lose those titles, and then big money's flushed down the toilet. And that's all I'll say. We'll definitely go on to another time next week, maybe talking about Teofimo Lopez. But that's all I got to say. I just wanted to throw that out there before.
Or maybe not, unless we want to call it the Teofimo Lopez in the Ring Radio Network. I don't know.
The takeover of Leaving the Ring. But going with Garcia, talk about the jab here from Luke Campbell. He's an Olympian. Yeah, you know what, man? I know you're impressed. Eddie Reynoso, he's been with Eddie Reynoso. You said you've seen some things. Those knockouts could have been a great boost for his confidence because he was struggling before Eddie Reynoso got into the camp, before he joined the Eddie Reynoso camp. Or it could definitely have hurt him. You need rounds. In my opinion, you need rounds to fight a guy with a pedigree that Luke Campbell brings to the table. Okay, speed, he has it. Garcia's got the explosive speed. He throws a beautiful left hook, a blinding left hook off the jab. I don't know how good his inside fighting is yet. Okay, he's always kind of been bigger than the guys that he faces. Luke is no different, but Luke to me has a lot more in the bag with Ryan. Like if Luke decides to want to box, I think Ryan's going to have some issues because he's going to have to catch Luke Campbell. I don't know if Ryan can cut the ring off. I don't know if he could push Luke back and get him against the rope, not once but twice, more times, okay? He's going to have to really slow down Luke in terms of using the whole ring, which I think that's what Luke's going to do. He's going to, he keeps talking about, I'm going to show this kid something he hasn't seen. And I think that's the thing that they should be working on. I think that's what they are working on. That because of the fact that you don't know how good Ryan Garcia's footwork is. Can he close the distance, okay, when it needs to be closed? Could he cut off the ring? Could he outbox the boxer in this fight? Because I don't know if I'm wrong about this, or can you really say that Ryan Garcia is the boxer in this fight? I think he's the puncher. I haven't really yet labeled him as the boxer-puncher.
No, he's the guy with the flashy hand speed and the one-hitter quitter. We haven't really seen him have to box against the high-level guy yet, which is why this is really exciting and why I said it's a fight that's going to answer a lot of questions. Luke, at the very least, is going to ask a lot of questions, and we're going to see if Luke Campbell, the Olympic gold medalist who's come up short as a pro, he's going to be administering a test, and we're going to see if.
Let's think about this.
If Ryan passes that test, let's see if he gets an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F.
Absolutely. And, Andres says, do you guys think Luke is the hardest opponent Ryan will face till now? Yeah, I think so. I mean, look at Campbell.
Not even close.
Exactly. Look at the names on his roster and on his resume. Okay, on paper, if you look at Ryan, there's not a lot of recognizable names. The guys that he has beat are either guys that are really tough club fighters, or guys that are on the come up where he was. You know what I mean? There was a lot of talks about this so-and-so fighter. Ryan just seemed to be the better guy in that night, okay? But you can't take away what Ryan has. And those are the obvious that we were just pointing out. But does experience, and we talked about this about the Ioka and Tanaka fight, okay? Does experience come to play in this fight? And that's one thing that I cannot take away from Luke. Mr. Blue put, the twitch of quick response from Ryan Garcia. That's something that I'm actually worried for Luke Campbell. Because if Luke Campbell's able to land, because here's the thing. I think Luke Campbell can fight a perfect fight, but if Garcia clips him, it could be over. And Luke's a tough kid. You know,
He is.
he got hurt with Lomo, and he hurt Lomo. I mean, Jorge Linares, in all of the weight division, of everybody in that weight division, you got to say he's the best boxer puncher. Above all of them. Best, okay? His only Achilles is jaw. And so, I mean, Luke Campbell went out there. It was giving Linares a run for his money. He was keeping up with Jorge Linares, with Lomachenko. And I go again, even having the perfect strategy against Ryan Garcia could end just like that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
that's my only worry.
Ryan Garcia is arguably, could arguably the heaviest one punch kind of knockout guy that he's faced. I mean,
above Teofimo Lopez,
Lomachenko definitely isn't that guy. Linares definitely isn't that guy, and neither is Ivan Mendy. And those are his 3 losses, all to top lightweights, all in very close decisions. I mean, the Linares fight was a split decision loss. The Mendy fight was a split decision loss. And the Vasil Lomachenko fight was a unanimous decision, but he hung in there till the very end and was having success.
He was having success, a lot more success than any other fighter that Lomachenko had stepped in with. You know, the thing, like I said, going back with Luke is again, do you go with the more experience or do you go with the fresher? And you got to admit, not only is he explosive, the kid's explosive, he's fast. They call him the Flash. That was his original nickname, Flash Ryan Garcia. But his confidence, man, his confidence level is of a champion level confidence without even doing the whole confidence. You
mean Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's super confident.
He's crazy confident.
I think that's one of his best assets. I think you kind of need that confidence. But it's got to be guided. It's the kind of confidence that Fernando Feroz Vargas had before he fought Tito.
I like what Shushan said.
He didn't have people reining him in.
Yeah, I like what Shushan Boxing said. We don't know if Ryan Garcia is the next Amir Khan.
This is true as well. But, if he ends up being like Amir Khan,
it's not bad.
Really knock that. I mean, Amir Khan won multiple world titles, so that ain't bad. But he's also been the victim of very bad knockouts.
And very bad matchmaking. Moved up and all that, But no, I don't think that's a bad company because Amir Khan has been in some great fights. He just couldn't get that marquee fight, I don't think they'll do that with Ryan Garcia. I think they're very carefully, moving him. And I think this Luke Campbell is a good matchup for Ryan Garcia to move up, and test the waters.
I think that Amir Khan proved his toughness. I know a lot of people question it because of the low blow and the way the Terrence Crawford fight ended. But if anyone wants to know anything about Amir Khan's toughness, you don't really need to look much further than the Marcos Maidana fight. That was a brutal fight, and he hung in there till the very end, despite getting hurt multiple times. And I also felt like he got the bad end of the stick against Lamont Peterson. I felt that should not have been a loss on his record, especially since Peterson failed a drugs test after that fight.
Yes.
You would have thought that would have just been reversed, but it wasn't.
No, it wasn't. Look, Nalo says definitely carries his chin like Amir Khan. That's what I want to see. I for sure, Campbell's he's gonna expose that, and it's so obvious, and nobody's been able to really expose it because the explosiveness, because it's a danger zone. Once you get in that little pocket, that in range of Ryan Garcia's left hook, that's what you got to be worried about, and that's what Campbell's gonna have to be worried about. But Campbell's got a good right hand. When he throws it, it's gonna land. So this is a very, honestly, very good, interesting fight.
That's what Bradis Prescott was able to capitalize on.
Yeah, exactly, over Amir Khan. So yeah, dude, I think it's a really good fight. I think honestly, man, it's really hard for me to say that this fight's going to end early. I could see a strongly possible chance that Ryan Garcia is going to lose a lot of these rounds in this fight. And then I could see that Luke gets a bit too overconfident and just stays in that pocket and actually does a Amir Khan thing, which is wait for that receipt and Ryan Garcia lands something really big, Or it could be that Luke is so disciplined in this fight and he's on point with his trainers, and this is the game plan. Never be there long enough to get the receiving from the Flash, Ryan Garcia,
I honestly think that that's his path to victory, Luke. Fight composed, utilize the jab, try to dominate the jab game, and don't necessarily try to trade flashy combination for flashy combination. Just stick with your boxing, and if anything, wait for those opportunities where that chin is up kind of high.
Yeah,
and you can possibly pull a Bradis Prescott. Other than that, box behind the jab.
If he's able to bring what he did against Jorge Linares, I think this is going to be a one-sided deal for him, okay? Because, look, with Jorge Linares, he had to set traps. Same thing with Lomachenko. And you're setting traps against very intelligent, high IQ boxers here. I'm not saying that Ryan's not intelligent. Ryan executes when he needs to execute, and he's been very successful at it. But he's been a checker player at this point that we've seen his career. We haven't really seen him be a chess player in the ring. And in my opinion, he's going to have to bring a little bit of that facing Luke Campbell. That's if Luke Campbell's, for some chance, has no legs anymore and decides to do the cardinal mistake, which is go after the young lion to see whether or not he does have sharp teeth and sharp claws. I just don't see him doing that. But what was your pick again, really quick, Emil Carr? Because we got to get going here on Leaving the Ring.
Yeah, my pick is kind of what people were saying about the Joe Joyce Daniel Dubois fight. If it ends early, Garcia. If it goes late, I'm going to start to favor Luke Campbell. If he can stay in there and not get blasted out. If Luke Campbell's there by the 10th, 11th round, by the championship rounds especially, I'm favoring Luke Campbell. The only thing is, will he get a fair decision in Texas? Texas is one of those places where you never know what you're going to get when it comes to those scorecards.
No, I agree with you on that. That definitely he's got to find out. Even that game plan that we're talking about that you're even mentioning right now, his stamina's got to be on point. He's got to be on point because I just don't see Ryan. You know what? This kid is he's a youthful guy. I think he's hungry, for fame. And he knows it's right there in his hand. And I see him stepping it up in those late rounds. I see Eddie Reynoso telling him, you got to do something. You're going to have to create something. And that's when it's going to be that moment. So I agree with you. I think that Luke Campbell brings a perfect plan, brings different faces to this plan that Ryan Garcia has yet to be tested with. Now, let's not say that Ryan hasn't seen it. He's been in the amateur, circle for quite some time. He's been around. It's not like he just kind of like showed up like a YouTuber, okay? Even though we make fun of the whole Instagram bout. But he's been around. There's a reason why people and myself want to watch this kid. We just want to know if he's the next big thing because he looks like he has the potential to be the next thing. But I go with you. I think that Luke is going to do a lot of boxing, not make very seldom mistakes, but I see Ryan picking it up on those late rounds, and I think Ryan gets a TKO over Luke Campbell, and I would have to go with like 10th or 11th round. I think he gets that win.
Yeah, I can see that as well, Dave.
Somebody, Dave. I don't watch the guy, so if he did, I wouldn't be surprised because he copies everybody. You know what I mean? He doesn't have his own personality or his own anything, man.
You're talking about your background at home?
Yeah, I mean, all my magazines, and I've seen a few people actually do that after. Yeah, it is what it is, bro. We start the trends and everybody follows. That's how it is here. No biggie. I actually think it's a compliment. I think it's a compliment when somebody does that and stuff. Okay, man. Anyways, guys, now I hear the sound.
Yeah.
I was able to hear that now.
Okay, well, at the very end, that's too bad. And we'll get it right for next time, guys.
Absolutely, man. Again, everybody, enjoy your weekend. Have a great, happy New Year. Hopefully, everybody stays in. Wear your mask so we can get back to normal here. Anyways, and no worries about that. We're going to be back next week. We got our end of the year awards that we're going to talk about, but we first got to get through the Ioka and Tanaka fight. We got to see if that's what's going to hold up to be the winner of Fight of the Year. Very excited about that. I'm Milcar, like always, brother. It's always a pleasure. See you guys next week. Dave. Do not drink and drive because you will spill your beer.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, damas y caballeros,